Good evening, everyone. Hi, friends. My name is Sarah Palmieri, and I am proud to be the Programming and Marketing Manager for the FirstOntario Performing Arts Centre. Thank you so much for joining us tonight from wherever you are. We're in for another great local reflections on racism. This is our monthly interactive online speaker series to keep up the momentum for racial inclusion and justice in St. Catharines. And it's presented by the FirstOntario Performing Arts Centre, the Folk Arts Multicultural Centre, and the Niagara Region Anti-Racism Association. Tonight, we're in for a really great conversation, and we're joined by our special host, Marcel Stewart, who is here repping the NRARA. And so I'm going to bring in Marcel now, and he'll take us through and introduce our special guest. And I'll see you on the other side. Hey, Marcel.
Hi, Sarah.
All right.
Thanks for having me. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I'm going to check out and check in online, and I'll see you on the other side.
Sounds good. So hello, everyone. It's weird I can't get a response. That's cool. We've got a short amount of time, so I'm just going to go right to reading Lydia's bio. So Lydia Collins is a Black queer writer and sexual health educator from the Niagara region. She published her first chapbook of poetry titled Angry Black Woman in January 2019 and has facilitated workshops and spoken in conferences at Brock University, Ryerson University, the University of Regina, and more. Lydia is a full-time HIV prevention strategy worker for African, Caribbean, and Black folks in Ottawa, Ontario. Give it up for Lydia Collins.
Hey!
We're matching.
I know, I was thinking that.
What?
Plan this.
That's amazing. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Hey, yes. Okay, let's dive right into this. I want to encourage everybody to ask questions or comment in the comment section. Otherwise, I'm sure Lydia and I could just get into a crime mob versus goatee mob debate all night long. So what I know is that you're from the Niagara region and now you're in Ottawa.
Yes.
So I'm curious, is there a restaurant from St. Catharines that you miss most?
Yes.
Talk to me.
Green Lotus Thai. St. Catharines. But I just found out today that it closed down apparently. I think due to the pandemic. So I don't know if that's just temporary due to what's going on, or if that's a long term, but the best fresh rolls, the best wontons, the best Thai food. They're just, and always great service. And I used to go there so much, probably too much. And but I just found out today they're closed. So
no way. What's the food scene like in Ottawa?
It's good. It's pretty good. I find what I like more in Ottawa is than some food. I wouldn't say there's food spaces that I particularly like more than St. Catharines, but I would say they have a lot of cool local cafes. But I mean, we have mate, so nothing can really compare to that. You know what
I mean? Up? Yes.
Food and cafes is still win. But there's a local chain here called Happy Goat, and they have some really, really, really good chai lattes. So I've been enjoying that for the past year.
Yeah. Okay. Now you're pretty active on the activism scene out here. How is it different in Ottawa? How are you finding the scene out there?
Yeah. I didn't expect it to be so drastically different. But I feel like in a lot of ways it is. And it's funny because when I first moved here last summer, I remember saying to people, thank you, Stacey Ann, you're awesome too. When I first moved out here, I remember the first few weeks I was, I didn't really know anybody. I was living with my sister at the time, and I was just looking, for jobs down here and for places down here, feeling it out, seeing if there's just somewhere I wanted to stay long term. And I remember feeling a lot of cold, harsh stares. And I was like, am I tripping? Because, sometimes you're like, is it just me or is it actually happening? And I was like, I asked my sister, what's going on? I feel like it's very, I don't know, harsh sometimes. And then I remember I was walking down the street one night with a friend, and a guy screamed the N-word at me on the street and was trying to hit me. And she like came right in front of me with her guitar. She was like Superwoman at that time. So shout out to my friend.
Yes.
That was like a few months in, and I was like, okay, so I'm not tripping. There is some blatant racism, more overt than I would say in St. Catharines, racism in Ottawa. And so I think for me, like I would always trying to explain it to people, I would say growing up in a small town like Niagara, like St. Catharines, even the white people that I grew up around, there was more of an emphasis on community. So I still felt that kind of sense of course I felt microaggressions. Of course there's racism. Of course there's even overt racism at times, but I felt more of a sense of connection and like protection from the white people that I knew. Like any white people that I knew that I grew up with in St. Catharines, like if somebody were to scream at me on the street, they would be the first to jump in. Right. Whereas it was like there was 2 white security guards down the street and like a white couple that walked by, and none of them stopped when that incident happened here in Ottawa. My friend, who's also a woman of color, she's Sri Lankan, she was the one who like put her body in front of me, you know.
Wow.
So I find that sense of kind of allyship, or I don't always like the word allyship, but I guess that sense of just like community and care I felt more in St. Catharines. So yeah, there's definitely there's a long history with very anti-Black racism from Ottawa police that dates all the way back to like the 90s. I know Desmond put it in his book. I know I've seen it kind of firsthand here. I know we recently seen it with the verdict of the death of Abdirahman Abdi. So it's very prominent here, even in institutions like some of the universities.
Yeah.
So I would say it's been a little bit more overt here than what I'm used to in a small town like St. Catharines. Yeah.
Wow. Now you said a word allyship, which is a word I've been chewing on a lot over the last few months. What does that word mean to you right now? What did it mean before? Talk to me about that word.
You know what? It's funny. I was like, I hate that word.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you brought that up, because you know what? I think it's one of those things where it's only a word. Like you have to give meaning to it. And so when I talk to non-Black folks who are like, what can I do? What can I do? I'm like, don't talk about it, be about it. Like in the simplest terms, right? You can't, it's not an identity. You don't get to take it on and be like, I'm an ally if you're not actually doing the work, right? You have to be doing the work, and people from Black communities have to tell you, oh, this person's an ally, this person's a safe person to be around, right? But you don't get to do that for yourself, right?
Yes.
And decide, oh, I have Black friends, I'm an ally, or I say I'm an ally because I said it on Twitter. It doesn't work like that. And so I have a good friend and really great activist and overall badass in Ottawa. Her name's Rosie. And I remember maybe last year when I first met her, I went to an event and she said something about how she doesn't bother using the word ally anymore. She always chooses to use the word accomplice, because she's like, when it comes to an accomplice, you have to be willing to put yourself on the line sometimes and be willing to risk some things for the better of somebody more marginalized. So you have to really, whether that be in the workplace, it means you are pulling strings, whether it means you are putting yourself in harm's way sometimes, like you have to be right there, if you're really going to be, I guess, showing up for someone, you have to be just as much in the way of harm or violence as they are, right? Like you can't come to protests and not be standing in front of Black people when police come and try to arrest us. Like you need to be in front of, you know what I mean? So, so I think for me, I really, really loved when Rosie mentioned that. Because it's just, I think it was such a great way that I was also chewing on for a long time, was like, what does this word allyship even mean? And I just think of like war when I think of allyship. Like I just was like kind of like annoyed with it at some points, because I would hear a lot of like white feminists be like, I'm an ally, and they would be like all about like, queer rights or veganism or, other things going on. It was always specifically queer rights and veganism. That's what it was always those two, but they'd always be racist. So I was like, what does this mean? Like love animal rights and and queer folks, but you don't like Black queer people. You don't care about Black people. Like I don't it doesn't add up, right? So yeah, so that's definitely like an interesting word that I had to take some time to really think through.
I saw this clip a month ago that talked about the difference between allyship and co-conspiratorship. And the person was saying that allies can sometimes make Black people feel bad for being Black, because they'll be like, yo, have you read the new Ta-Nehisi Coates? Have you read the new this? And you're like, no, I'm like, I'm busy. I'm being Black. I'm like out in the world trying to live. Like I ain't got no time to read.
Right.
So it's interesting that we brought this up.
Absolutely. It makes me think too, because I talked about this with someone recently about how it's almost dangerous sometimes when in times like this, we often are like, white people need to just read, right? Like they need to get educated more on Black rights and they need to just read. And I'm like, yes, but there's a lot of privilege to that, right? And then you almost see the white folks who I've experienced in academia who kind of are like, those white African studies majors who are like, did you know about this? Did you know about this? And they're like telling me about myself. And they're like,
right.
I read Bell Hooks, so this isn't actually racism that you're experiencing. It's this, right? So like, sometimes people kind of almost use this information and be like, well, I got to sit at home comfortable and read a bunch of Angela Davis books for the last 7 months. And so I want to tell you now that I'm an ally because I get this. But I'm like, but you don't get what it means to move through the world in a Black body, right? You understand what it means to read about it in an academic setting, and that's a completely different thing. And so, yeah, I find sometimes dangerous because like they use it against us and be like, I know about did you know about I remember one time my undergrad, a woman who was a geography major tried to tell me that not all Black folks essentially not all Black folks could be, I guess, almost upset about slavery because not all Black folks ancestors experienced slavery based on where you were in the world. And I was like, well,
hold up.
I'm not having this conversation. We can have this conversation, but not with you. So, yeah, it's interesting.
So, man, I have so many questions here. Okay, let's talk about education. I feel like you're heavily influenced by the teachers around you who are part of your community, and I'm curious. Shout out to Rosie. Who else in your world who's taught you throughout your life? Who are some of the teachers? Blood and also external.
Yeah. I would say some of the most important teachers for me, growing up and throughout my undergrad and even now in Ottawa. And one thing I will say about Ottawa that's been so beautiful is the amount of love and sense of community from Black folks in Ottawa, especially like Black youth, has been amazing. So many amazing people doing this work, doing activist work, community health work. So many dope people who, I gotta say, a lot of Black queer people specifically here in Ottawa. So I would say, yeah, Rosie's definitely one. Marissa, shout out to Marissa. She has a Black book club here called Black Thoughts. She's also a women's health outreach coordinator, I think that's the title, for the AIDS Committee of Ottawa. Tyler and Taib, they're brothers. They both do incredible work in Ottawa for queer communities, for Black communities, for sexual health, with a focus on HIV and HIV prevention. That's kind of how I connected with them. Keegan, who's a colleague of mine, who's also really great. Like the list goes on and on and on and on and on. They more so from back home in Niagara, I have a really good friend, Zeneb. I have a really good friend, Katawi. Both actually have worked at Brock. Katawi still works at Brock. She's the Human Rights and Anti-Racism Coordinator for the Human Rights and Equity Department. And she is phenomenal. And yeah, like I've been a stan since I met her in like my second year of university. And really, really grateful for all the work she does. And I kind of got really involved into a lot of things on campus because of her, because she had started a group called Young, Black, and Educated. And of course, because it was like this Black women's group, of course, it was underfunded. Of course, the university didn't give us anything, or, they gave us like the bottom room in the basement to
of
meet.
Course.
Right. So, and she made the most out of it. And we had like some really dope conversations and made really great friendships. And she connected me with a lot of people who I ended up being friends with, like, long term. And so That was really great. I would say even, you know, there's some really great profs at Brock. Margot Francis, I would say, is a big one for me. She was the definition of what I understood as an accomplice. As a white woman, a professor who was just like, yo, I've got these resources, you get the platform, do what you want, right? And with her, we actually got to start with a bunch of different Black and Indigenous people of color. There was a group of us who started Decolonize and Deconstruct, which was an on-campus activist group, actually focused on providing consent education through a decolonial lens. So we got to kind of go around and do it in classrooms. We got to travel. Me and Zenab, who I mentioned earlier, actually got to present our research at Congress in Saskatchewan. And so that was really great. And so Margot was there. Margot Francis was there the whole time. She's a women's studies professor. And just like one of those people who, just good people, you know, just good people. But yeah, I know I'm missing so many, like the list goes on and on, but those are some of the ones that stick out right now who have kind of been within the last couple of years, especially like really influential for me and kind of how I do my own teaching and my own activism and yeah.
And how do you find, or how did you find the reception to that kind of work in this community, in like, you know, the Brock community or the classes that you were going out to? Like, what was the response like from St. Catharines and Niagara?
Yeah, so I would say it's funny because I'm so happy when I go, like anytime I visited Brock in the last like year, I went for, I think I did a workshop there or did a book signing there in March, just before COVID popped off. And and I feel like everything I described is like before COVID, after COVID.
Right.
How I understand life now. But I remember when I was there, I went to an event that it was the first meeting, I think, for a new group called Black Female Empowerment. And it was like probably close to like 100 people in that room. And it was like packed, all different kinds of Black folks, different ages, different shades. And I was like, whoa, because it's so funny just seeing even that 5-year difference. Because when I was in my undergrad, let's say like 5 years ago or earlier in my undergrad, I remember there was like 3 Black groups. One was Black East African Association, and I was part of that. I did the social media for them. And then one was Buga, which is the Ghana Association, and one was Roots, which was the African and Caribbean Association. And we all kind of like supported each other. There was honestly like, it felt like there was like probably 30 people in the university, like 30 of us. And it was so funny seeing the difference of, you know, we had such a close-knit community because we needed to, and because there was like so little of us, and because there was always backlash from the university, right, in regards to like getting funding for some of these things and getting support. And I particularly remember I had a friend who, when Black Lives Matter was kind of a newer movement, they did a Black Lives Matter panel and asked me to be on it. And I think this was maybe like 2016. And I remember they were putting up posters and they kept getting torn down. And so I remember even when I worked at the Student Justice Center, like we would do cultural appropriation campaigns and get like hate mail and death threats. And so it's interesting because I've definitely seen a shift, and the Student Justice Center and the Human Rights and Equity Department have like done such phenomenal work. So seeing like some of the people who are there right now, Jermaine Marshall, I know, is there, Katawi's there, like just all these people doing really, really, really great work in these departments who I know were students, you know, at the time that I was. It's nice to see them now in those positions, kind of taking those leadership roles and making like real change on campus. And so yeah, I would say when we went to classrooms though, I will say it was mostly well received. We had a lot of great conversations, with lots of different students.
And have you found, I guess, the reception in Ottawa different? Have you found the approach to your activism work different? Is there anything that, you know, you could impart on the Niagara audience about some of the stuff you found out in Ottawa?
Yeah, I would say, again, like I said earlier, like I was so overwhelmed by the amount of like love and just community from like Black folks in Ottawa. Um, I didn't expect to see it so quickly, because when I first moved here, and before I started in my role, and that's kind of really how I met a lot of different people. I didn't see Black folks anywhere. Like you really had to look for them. Like I was like, yo, like where? I feel like I'm in Get Out. Like I would sit in the park, right, and I would be like, where are the Black people? Like I lived kind of like downtown, so I know it was like a popular student area. I know it's popular. I know gentrification is very strong in Ottawa. So I know that some of these places, like the place that I was living in, it's called Centertown, is more of like a white, student, young professional kind of area. So there's different areas where you'll see maybe more Black people, more brown people, more Arab people, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
I didn't really know much of it, obviously, when I first moved here, but I kind of know a little bit more about that now. But yeah, so I couldn't find them anywhere. And then as I started doing this kind of work, and I got a chance to meet a lot more of them, and they were instantly so supportive and super receptive, and collaboration, like so many collaborations. And for me, it was really important to not come into my role and come into Ottawa and just be like, I'm going to take over, because I think that happens a lot of times where Black folks who are doing this kind of work, doing activist work, or even doing different kinds of like artistic projects, come into spaces and be like, well, I don't see anybody else doing it, so I'm going to do it. And like that can be dangerous sometimes, because I didn't see a lot of Black folks at first when I moved to Ottawa, but I quickly learned that there are many, and that many of them are doing incredible work, right? And so instead of me being like, I'm going to start this group and I'm going to do this workshop, like I spent the first few months, honestly, just attending workshops, just attending different workshops, getting to know different Black organizers and Black community health educators, and seeing what they were doing and what's already been done, and see where the gaps actually are before I just started doing all this programming and actually like stepping on people's toes, right?
Right.
So I think actually like building that rapport and getting to know the folks in your community doing similar work is so important. And that's something that I would say was done quite well when I was in my undergrad, because like I said, there were maybe 3 Black groups, and we all would kind of coordinate and be like, okay, don't have your final event, at this time, or don't do it. So we very, very, very important to us is to like not step on each other's toes, because we knew how important it was for everyone to be able to do those events without there having to be that overlap, especially because there's already only 3 Black groups here. We don't know who's all going to attend, so if everyone's going, like to
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah.
Okay, art, activism, and education. All right, like what is that intersection for you? How do you find yourself actively engaging with all 3? And if I can ask a third question, how do those 3 inform your purpose?
It's a really good question. I love these questions. You have such great questions.
Oh, thank you.
Sometimes like, you do like I don't know, like conversations or interviews, or people ask you questions, and sometimes you're just like, like this isn't this isn't really
Yeah, it's like it's flat, right?
yeah.
Oh, thank you.
This is great. I would say for me, I think art and activism and education they intersect so much even without realizing it. Before I even really meant to, I think I was already intersecting the 3 in different ways. And I guess the best way for me to kind of describe it in regards to how I try to incorporate it into my work and into my work is kind of by explaining some of the things that I do or have done that kind of do their best at intersecting all 3. And so for me, a really important one was when I worked at the Student Justice Center. There was like a workshop series that I had for for survivors of sexual violence. And so it was, I think, a 4-week series of different workshops talking about different topics under the realm of sexual violence. And for that, and I tried to do it with other workshops as well, but for that one particularly, it was really, really special because I had canvases and paint and like glitter and like markers and shit and like just like different stuff for people to be able to use, because especially with having heavy conversations, I know that it's very useful for a lot of people to be able to have a bit of a distraction, be able to draw or paint or write. And then we actually made there was a campaign that the Student Justice Center did as well. So those paintings from those sessions got hung around the university, and it was a We Believe You campaign I think it was for Sexual Violence Awareness Week or month. And that was a few years ago. So that was a really great one to be kind of discussing activism, to be giving that educational component of, talking about some information regarding sexual violence and kind of breaking down some statistics, talking about like stigma and having broader conversations, but also incorporating art in there. Because I noticed that it does make a difference, and it did make folks open up a little bit more than me just standing at the front of the room and being like, talk to me, like, let's talk. And I think even in my teaching style, when I do workshop facilitation or anything, is really rooted in this kind of, I guess, relates to talking about my purpose. And for me, my purpose is telling my story as best as I can, and as being as authentic as I can, because I think my relatability has been what's been the best part of my teaching experience and of my writing. And that's the feedback that I've gotten the most, is like, this is so relatable, or right. And I heard a great quote from someone before, and they mentioned that being a great writer, essentially along the lines of like, being a great writer has nothing to do with grammar and punctuation and spelling. It has to do with perspective, right? It has to do with how you tell the story and what story you have to tell, and kind of who can relate to it, and how folks kind of take it. And so I guess that's kind of what I would say in regards to my purpose, and relating it back to my style of trying to go about teaching and incorporating these different aspects. I try to always remember that there's never one expert in the room. And so I never try to go about, and that's why I think I've always leaned more towards like workshop facilitation rather than like wanting to actually go the route of being like in a traditional teaching style, like in a classroom setting, because it's so important to me to be able to cater my workshops or my anything that I'm doing to the people in the room, right? And I think that's it shows when you do that, because I've done workshops with admin and staff in universities and faculty members in universities, all the way to youth in homeless shelters, youth in transitional housing who are young offenders, like all different kinds of people from all different walks of life, which I think is so exciting, and so necessary. Or else like I can't, in regards to HIV prevention work I do, like I can't, and working with ACB, with black folks, I can't decide that for everyone, me coming in dressed up and just talking at the front of the room and giving all of these information and all of these statistics and all of these facts and just talking at people, especially young people, for an hour is going to be effective. It's not always going, right? It's rarely going to. So yeah, trying to be, for me, our activism and education, it's really a way to bring together so many similar topics, because essentially we can talk about all the same topics for all three. They do the same thing, just in different ways, right? Like if I'm talking about race, or I'm talking about sexual violence, or I'm talking about sexual health, all three of these things are relevant to that. It's just a matter of how like your learning style, how you digest things, and how it's being presented. But they really are all doing the same thing.
Totally. Oh wow. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. I just want to ask you real quick, what is self-care to you? How do you take care of yourself when investing in this kind of work? And I know we're almost at time, so what does self-care for you right now, given the state of everything that's going on and the investment in this kind of work that you do?
Yeah. For me, I always put such a huge emphasis on radical self-care. And essentially what that is, and for people who may have not heard that before, is looking at self-care outside of the context of like consumerism, right? So looking at it outside of just like buy a bath bomb or treat yourself, do this and that. Like outside of that, so radical self-care more looks into the ways in which you can make sure you're preserving yourself, taking care of yourself on a more intentional basis. So for me, that's things like saying no, that's things like asking for help, that's things like going to all my making doctor's appointments. I'm diabetic, so like making sure that I'm taking care of my diabetes, like those things, like getting my teeth cleaned, like these
Yes.
that we don't think of as self-care are, right? So for me, it's really been like saying no, asking for help. Those have been some of the big ones I would say lately. And sometimes saying no, especially in kind of, the state, like you mentioned, things being really hectic right now. Saying no to sometimes like being on social media or saying no to, if people have a question like, oh, what's going on? Or what's this? Or can you do this? And I just have to be like, nah,
You
I
can't. Not today.
There's so many other people doing it, so find somebody else to do it. So yeah, those are some of the ways that I try to take care of myself.
Amazing. Thank you. I feel like we can keep talking,
Yeah.
but we've got to dip to the private Zoom. So and we can continue this there. Oh, great. Thank you, Sarah, for putting that on there. Thank you, Lydia, so much for chatting with me.
Of course.
We'll continue it in Zoom.
The after party. Okay.
And the after party. Yeah, the kickback.
Thank you so much, Marcel and Lydia. And yeah, I was just like kicking back and you guys could have kept going forever. I was just enjoying your conversations. And I really appreciate both of you and your time that you're giving tonight to the community. And we're going to jump off here and jump on Zoom. So there'll be an opportunity for an in-depth conversation. All the links are in the comments. And thank you to both of you, and wherever you are out there, we hope you're safe and sound and warm and cozy. So we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.